Seated. And if we have some children who would like to come forward for the message for all ages. Oh, we got a lot of kids here this morning. So how many of you like birds? Everybody likes birds. How many people like big birds? Not the big bird on Sesame Street, but big birds like cranes. How many people have ever seen a crane? You've been to the Crane Foundation up at Baraboo where they got lots of different kinds of cranes? Yeah, well, this is a story about a crane. Once there was a very poor student who was also very talented. He was a poet, and he was a musician, and he was an artist, but like a lot of artists, including my son, he was not very good at making money. And so oftentimes he didn't have 2 pennies to rub together. But the student had a good friend who owned a restaurant and a tea house. And so in the evenings, he would go alone to this tea house, and he would sit in a corner, and he would drink tea, and he would write in his journal, and he would draw in his drawing book. And his generous friend oftentimes would bring out something for him to eat. Well, one night, the student came to the tea house, as he usually did, but this time he did not sit down in his usual corner. And instead, out of his pocket, he took some chalk. And he went over to a wall of this tea house, and he began to draw. And pretty soon, a crane, a beautiful crane, began to take shape. And people were watching him drawing this bird on the wall, and it was so detailed, and it was so magnificent that they half expected it to jump off the wall and stand up. When he had finished with his drawing, the student turned to his friend, and he said, "You have been really, really kind to me. You have let me sit here every night drawing. You've given me as many cups of tea as I wanted. You have fed me. And so now I want to pay you back. And that's why I have drawn this crane on your wall. It is a magic crane. Because if you clap your hands 3 times, the crane will stand up, come off of that wall, and dance for you. But it will only dance 1 time each day. And if you make it dance more than 1 time, it will go away and it will never come back again." And so with these words, the student clapped his hands 3 times, and indeed, the crane came off of the wall, stood up, and performed the most intricate and beautiful dance. And the guests were astounded to watch this happen. And when he had finished his dance, the crane melted back onto the wall again. And this is what the crane looked like when he was dancing. They have long beaks, yes. This is a sandhill crane. And there's actually a lot of these in Wisconsin. They migrate through Wisconsin every year. So, as you can imagine, with this magic crane in the tea house, it became a very popular place. And people would come every day to watch the crane come off of the wall and do this dance. But the owner always heeded that student's advice, and he never made the crane dance more than once a day. So you had to get there at just the right time to see this happen. But then one night, a very rich man, a millionaire in fact, he came into the tea house. And this was a forceful and kind of a selfish man, and a lot of people were afraid of him. They held him in awe. And he too, he'd heard about this dancing crane, and he had come to see it. But he was too late. The bird had already danced once that evening. And so the owner said, "I'm sorry, I cannot possibly make the bird dance again." But the rich man was absolutely insistent. He said, "I am not going to leave here until this bird dances for me." And he took a bag of gold out of his pocket, and he put it on the counter, and he said, "I want this bird to dance." Well, what could the poor innkeeper do? He didn't have a whole lot of money, and this was a very intimidating man. And so very reluctantly, the owner clapped his hands, 3 times, and very slowly the crane came off of the wall, its head hanging, and yes, it danced a 2nd time, but it was the most sorrowful and sad dance that everybody in the inn was in tears when it was over. And when the dance was over, the doors to the tea house opened, and the young poor student, the artist, came in, and he picked up the crane, the weakened crane, tucked it under his arm, walked out the door, and neither he nor the crane were ever seen again. So it's a sad story, but it's about 2 kinds of power. There's a creative power that belongs to beauty, the beauty of art and the beauty of music that brings happiness to so many people. And then there's this other kind of power, the destructive power that a single selfish person can use to satisfy his own desires, but that steals happiness from everybody else. And so may we always use our power to increase the world's beauty and its goodness, and may we use that power to disempower those who would take all of that away from us. So that's